Welcome back to another edition of The Road to 100 with Black AI Media. I'm Cedric Scott Jr., and we have another spectacular guest here today to talk about amazing work in the space. Definitely some awesome business savvy. So I'm interested to learn some good information here. Definitely in kind of like the marketing and branding spaces. And I always take a couple of tips whenever I hear you talk and the things that you share online. So I'm looking forward to getting to that. But I want to open up space. We have Jeneba Wint here with us, and I want to just open up for an opportunity for you to give us a little intro, and then we'll get into our question.
Thanks, Cedric. Thank you for having me. As you know, my name is Jeneba Wint, and I am the founder of Bloomology and Soft Life Engineering. Bloomology is a personal branding consultancy, and we're doing a lot of work in the personal branding space. We have our Chat GPT, Bloomy Brand GPT, which is a personal branding assistant through AI, through Chat GPT. And then Soft Life Engineering is my corporate wellness company, and also it teaches AI literacy for Black women and BIPOC women. And so in that space, we are using AI to empower women to it kind of like soft life your way into AI. So how you could use AI for wellness and mindset and that kind of work, and how you can use it to basically live a softer life. That's the goal. One of my slogans or something I always say in that space is get somebody else to do it, and that's AI. So it can help you to just kind of take off that cognitive load, some of that stress, some of that hard work that you may not have to do because you can get AI to do it. So that's kind of sums up all the work that I'm doing in AI. I'm a personal branding strategist and architect, and that's the work that I do.
I want to go into our driving question related to what's happening in tech and the AI space in particular, in alignment with the work that you're doing. What does narrative mean to you?
That's such a great question. So narrative is story. That's what narrative means to me. Everything from an origin story to the story that people tell about you. So when I think of narrative, I automatically think of personal branding because that's in my mind or in the work that I do, the way that you own your narrative, right? And so narrative to me is just the story, your own story, and then the story that people tell about you. So it's a little bit of legacy, but a little bit of story at the same time.
Related to some of that, because we're talking about branding, we're talking about supports for women, entrepreneurship, a lot of those components. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey, though, and how
Yeah.
you really ventured into more of the tech and AI space? Like, how did you get started, and what led you to where you are today with creating those corporate entities and businesses that you set up?
That's a great question. So, just tying it all back to narrative, I think that my narrative going into tech and my mindset going into tech was to approach it from an entrepreneurship standpoint. That's kind of my always been my narrative in tech. And when I say that, I mean like I'm the brand, right? Like it's not Microsoft or I work at Microsoft or I'm proud to work at Google, whatever. It's like I'm Jennifer. This is what I do. This is a skill set that I bring. This is how much you need to pay me for said skill set. And so that's kind of like how I've always approached my career. And that's been my narrative. And I'll just go back to how I started. I actually don't come from a tech background, a traditional tech background, I would say. I do come from a tech background a little bit. I have this picture next to me on my desk. So that's me at like 3. You can see that big back computer right there and that big back printer. So I've kind of always been exposed to technology, into technology. I was a huge gamer, but I didn't even know that there was a tech career. Like when I was in high school, going to college, I didn't know that this is what people were doing for their job. I wasn't really exposed in that way. I had been a user, exposed, but I had not been, and I had been like building stuff, taking stuff apart, I was always that person that's like, can you set up my computer? Like when we got on college campus, like, can you set the computer up for me? I should have been charging for that, but I didn't even know that that was a job. But I actually was a poli sci major, so I was going to be a lawyer when I first started, I guess, like going to school and all that stuff. And then I went into architecture school because I was going to be an urban planner. And then the recession happened, and I didn't know what I was going to do because I couldn't find a job. And I was working at Zara with a whole master's degree. So I literally just one night was like, well, what can I do with this degree? Went on Google. Google gave me a whole list of what can you do with this degree. One of the things that came up was technical writing. I was like, I know I could do that. Like, I'm already doing that. I read a job description. Then I just finessed my resume into a technical writing resume. And I literally started from there. That's my start in technology is technical writing on product team, dev team. I actually didn't even start in tech. I started technical writing in oil and gas industry because I was living in Houston at the time. And then I figured out that that's a skill that's going to be that's like in any industry. Like all industries have a form of technical writing, whether that's like science, healthcare, tech, whatever. And so then I just pivoted it into tech. But that's how I started.
It's always interesting to hear from folks who might not necessarily have a formal, we'll call it tech background or degrees or experience, and to hear how, in most cases, I've heard those same people learn more practically to leverage technology to actually move themselves forward. So I think there's something to that, and I really appreciate you breaking that down and sharing, because I think there's a lot of learnings that people can take from just hearing that segment of your story. And I wanted to go back into in thinking about kind of your motivation, because you mentioned you were at a point where you said, well, what can I do with this degree? Right, your master's degree, and you basically did a Google search, and I'm assuming, of course, that this is pre Chat GPT, where you
Oh,
could
this
go in.
is this is when we only had Google. Okay, like we didn't the AI was there, but like the average consumer, we didn't have AI. So just straight up Google search and putting it in. So yeah, you're on the right track.
So I think related to that, what might be helpful for some of the listeners as well is the I think the motivation behind taking that initiative, and then from there going to not necessarily, I think, even building on your work as a technical writer, but tell us a little bit about the motivation to propel yourself, and ultimately how did that aspect of what you're doing come to life, going from how do I use my degree to land myself a role in this world, but then also how do I become somebody who really takes up space?
Yeah. So it's so funny because I went to a tech networking event last night, and people were asking questions and talking about like how do I get in, and some people were talking about like just sharing, swapping career stories and stuff like that. And I think the motivation is really just from that Google search. I started seeing salaries like there was still stuff like Indeed, salary.com, whatever. So I started seeing like in that research how much people in technology were making and then how much people not in technology were making. And so I already knew what it's like to be broke, right? With a degree. So I'm like, I'm not going to be broke. I'm going to choose something that's lucrative and that's also I would say always going to be around. And so that was really the motivation for me choosing technology out of all the fields that Google was giving me and all the industries that it was giving me was that I know that I can use my skill set here. I also know that I could make an impact here. I also know that this is like a longevity play because I'm always going to be able to get a job or work somewhere or get paid a high amount of money for this skill set. Also, knowing that I was kind of coming in seeing as entry level, even though I already know that I wasn't an entry level person because I had 2 degrees and I had worked before going into technology or making that pivot. So also I was looking at like where can I work that's entry level, but I still can get respect as a person coming in here new. I also can get paid a high amount of money as a person coming in here new. So that was part of my thinking too. It's like positioning, also going back to branding. I think like I always had that branding mindset, even though I didn't even know it was branding. Choosing a field, figuring out how your skill set can work over here, over here, over here, positioning yourself. I always like those are principles of branding, but I didn't know that's what I was doing. But that's kind of like always been a part of how I approach things.
Got it. And was there a single defining moment, or I mean, because we've talked a little bit about your pathway and trajectory and how some of those decisions you made to establish yourself and move in a certain way, even if you were going into entry level positions or opportunities, there was still a framing as you laid it out, as in terms of understanding branding without really understanding branding as it's formal. Was there a defining moment though in your career, ultimately, regardless of whether that was within working at a company or choosing to work for yourself, or build your own entity, was there a time that you really realized the potential that the work that you were doing, of that impact that you could have related to the sphere of tech and AI?
So my career is a little bit different, and so I introduced myself saying that I always thought of it like an entrepreneur, but that's because I was forced to. So I started as a contractor, freelancing and contracting at the same time. And so I think whereas that used to be framed as a bad thing too. I didn't start like full-time benefits. I think when people start that way, it's nothing wrong with it, but when people's career goes that way, they're more, I would say, aligned to the company that they work for, or they're not thinking about personal branding. They're more thinking about like, I work at Microsoft, so I'm good. Or I work at Airbnb, so I'm good. My ticket is written. Whereas for me, I had to always think like that because I had to pitch myself because I was a contractor. So if those that don't know, contracting and freelancing in tech is also very lucrative, but you work on a contractual basis. So you might be signed up to work for like a 12-month contract or a 24-month contract, 18 months, 6 months, whatever. But you go through a middleman, an agency, or a consulting company, and then they place you at, like Wells Fargo or Bank of America, Microsoft, whatever. So you're technically like not working there, but you are working there. So I leveraged those names to build my career, but then I was also still building my personal brand because I couldn't really say that I worked at Google. Like I would like take that name or wherever I worked and put it on my resume, but then like when I was online, I would always be like leading with my personal brand, my company. And so I think that was the defining moment, is me starting off as a contractor and then having opportunities that way. I think that kind of propelled me to where I am now, is because I was always thinking of I am the business, I am the brand. So that's kind of like what started me on this whole entrepreneurial thing, is that I always kind of had my own thing on the side while working. And then I think I was with this major contracting, or if you freelance, you probably heard of like a company. It's called Aquient. When I started working with them, they were like, you should probably do UX. Like your skill set is aligned with that. The way you think is aligned with that. I had never heard of it. This is like, I don't know, 15 years ago. And so this is at a time when like tech is really Now it's a whole different ball game. But like you could literally finesse your way into tech. Not saying you can't do it now, but it was a lot easier then because there was a lot less people working in tech. So they said I should get into UX. So I said, okay. So they have like a lot of upskilling opportunities. I just took all their classes, learned about UX. I started positioning myself for like content strategist, UX writer, more jobs that were in UX. And then I got one and I haven't looked back since. I just was like, from that day, I was like, I'm an expert in UX. I just grew from there, and I worked in UX and product ever since, like in the UX in the tech space formally. But outside, I was always keeping myself up on what was going on in the tech space, and that's how I knew about AI. Is because I didn't just like stay at my day job. I'm good. I work in tech. I'm good. Like that was never my mindset. It was always like, I have to be up on whatever's going on because this company could lay me off. This contract could be over. I always had to think of what was next because I was a contractor. So I was always like, well, what's next? I might be working at this job on this project, this company, but I need to know what's next for myself. And so I think that's always been key for me and a defining moment for me, how I've been able to move so freely in my career as like owning my narrative or as an entrepreneur while working like a corporate entrepreneur is because I've had to always think like that. What's next? What's coming? What skills should I be learning next? What should I be looking into? Especially as someone who doesn't have a technical background, didn't do computer science, don't have any type of technical degree. I also, up until this year, never had any certs either. So I always had to like be on it because I'm coming from that perspective.
And I actually align a lot with some of the things that you mentioned related to kind of that more, I guess, entrepreneurial
Yeah, that's the word.
endeavors, right? Like, in you're still kind of associated with corporate entities and organizations, even if you're working there as an employee. You kind of still have the mind frame and really the push for yourself to continue to learn, grow, and at the same time you can build your own thing. And if it takes off, it takes off, which is amazing. And definitely related to some of the things that you mentioned regarding being laid off. And I mean, I've been there. I personally was laid off, went through all the contractual pieces, did the freelance work, which was also a good fallback. I think now, as we will jump into some insights that you can share related to your current work, your current projects, and how those things are actually making a difference. And I know that one thing that you spoke about was empowering and supporting and uplifting women in this space. And I want to open up avenue for you to talk a little bit more about that and the differences and just the wins that you're starting to see or have been seeing from doing that work within what you've created and built.
Yeah, so my most recent win that I'm so proud of is I met up with somebody randomly who I had they came to a AI in podcasting training that I had over the summer. And so I saw them again like last weekend, and I didn't expect for them to say this, but they said that they took what I showed them in AI in that space because I wasn't just talking about podcasting. I always try to show people how you can use AI for everyday things, soft life, to make your life better. So I started the training just talking about if you're using ChatGPT, you need to configure it first before you start using it. So she took that and she got a significant increase at her job. She went back to work and I guess she had already been thinking she needed to get a raise. So she used everything to position herself for a raise. She redid her resume. She did her research on what the marketplace was saying that she should be getting paid. So did her market research. And then she created a pitch from that to take to her manager to say, like, I need to get a raise. And this is why. And she got it. And so and then she was using my training. She was using Bloom me. So that was a super big win for me because I didn't even realize that that's or knew that that's what she did. So I was so proud of that. Other ways, helping people redo their LinkedIn. So helping you get your personal brand out there. And I think for me, the work that I'm doing is more about helping people discover their purpose work and what they're here for. I think like that for me that is what personal branding is. It's more about um positioning yourself in the best way for your whether it's your career or your business, and that's the work that I'm really most proud of. It's framed as personal branding, but when you get down to it, it's like I'm helping you figure out what is your zone of genius and then how can you monetize that.
And I know a lot of people certainly appreciate the monetization aspect of it, right? Because a lot of us we create, we produce things, and we say, all right, I got this repository of stuff. So what do I do with it? How do I, leverage it for myself versus, especially in a contractual or employee context, have the company or organization that I'm working with or for leverage my genius,
Yeah.
and they know how to monetize it and build off of it. And while we might get some kickback or scraps, it's really not much in relation to what they're able to produce and build. So I think that what you're doing to actually highlight how people can do those things in a really seamless and kind of tangible, practical way is what I really want people to take from this whenever they contact you or whatever, that be the emphasis behind it.
Yeah, and they can contact me just on LinkedIn or through Bloomology website or email me hello@thebloomology.com. But one of the things that I'm working on besides having Bloomy out there is an offer AI that I'm going to be coming out with top of the year, which is going to help you do exactly what you just said. You might have all this content out there. You might have things that you produced out there because I've been there before myself. But in using AI, I'm always looking for how do I put this together? They call it in the business world like a value ladder. How can I put this together in stages and steps and then release this to make it into an offer to monetize it? Like, what are you actually offering based on your skill set, based on the content you're putting out there? And so that's something I'm working on and I'm super proud of is creating that offer bot to help people on the back end. Basically, it's going to be like me consulting you, but through a bot. So I'm super proud of that work too because we need to get paid for our IP, and that's what it's all about.
I agree there. I mean, I got my personal assistant Rick, and yeah, he's definitely on the back end doing a lot of a lot of the work that I'm like, just no, I'm not dealing with that right now. You consult and just push people to where they
Yeah,
need to go, which is great.
yeah,
So I'll be looking forward to seeing that, and of course sharing and supporting. But I wanted to talk a little bit about, you got a lot of this, movement, making progress. You got people coming up to you saying you changed my life.
yeah,
So I'm curious though to hear a little bit about the other side of that. Like, what are some unique challenges you faced when working on your current initiatives, on Bloomology, on the Soft Life, anything that you've kind of done more independently in the space? What challenges have you seen there, and curious as to how you overcame those?
um, I would say working in AI challenges that I'm seeing, of course, is the responsible AI piece of it, the ethical piece. So you have people that say everything is stolen that you're doing in AI, or you have like a lot of naysayers, or you have a lot of people who are against or opposed to AI. So I would say that that's the most challenging part, but also rewarding at the same time because through the work that I do, I'm able to change people's mindset and change their whole energy and vibe about AI just by working in AI. So, or just by putting out content about AI and how I'm using it, I think it's able to change people's mind and mindset and their approach to it. But I would say that's like a big challenge is the responsible part and the ethical part of it, and people being against that, especially because we don't really have legal framework around responsible and ethical AI yet. The US is very behind when it comes to responsible AI from the legal and the policy standpoint. We actually don't even have a governing policy like on the national level. There's been a few states and a few counties, local government who has put out stuff in AI, but for the most part, we don't have like a US policy around it. The EU is mostly where people are getting their information from right now. They're like light years ahead of us when it comes to responsible, ethical AI and policies and actual legal frameworks around this stuff. So I kind of don't blame people. At the same time, we don't have official policy in the US yet. So, it's not really there. But at the same time, you don't want to get left behind either. So you want to be aware and you want to be a player in the space. And going back to narrative, you want to have some sort of ownership. You want to be building, because if not, it's just like with everything else. The internet or um, Google, or using the products that are now in our everyday life, Google Drive, Google Suite, Microsoft products. If you're not using it, then you're behind.
I think related to some of the policy things, one of the common, I think, terms or phrases that I've heard related to the US is it's like the Wild West.
Yeah,
It's
it
like just
is.
kind of running around, doing whatever. And there aren't necessarily those parameters and restrictions in place to say, okay, this is what we can do. This is within the confines of being ethical, being responsible. This is not. So again, there's a lot of speculation, people pointing fingers, but one thing I definitely want to shed more light on is what you mentioned about ownership and actually getting involved, jumping in and becoming someone who is active in the space and not just kind of sitting on the sidelines, because as we know, this is moving really fast. And especially if you're somebody who has children or works with young people, you see in their life like how this is becoming such a kind of pillar in society. So I wanted to follow up on and kind of ask the next question is related to your current work. How do you see those things contributing to like the global Black community or the global tech community at large as you're continuing to move forward, build out your goals and your visions?
Yeah, so I see it contributing through mostly the AI literacy work and the education work that I do. And I think that's just based on knowing my strengths and knowing how I make an impact prior to AI. So I'm always that person that's telling people, like, I'm the plug, like in my socials. Like I'm always telling people, check out this new thing, or there's this new product, or people always come to me like, I'm trying to do X, Y, and Z in my business, or I'm trying to do X, Y, and Z. What should I use? What should I do? And so I've always been that person. So now, since I know that, I want to apply that to AI, and I want to apply that to, you're trying to figure out this problem. Okay, well, let me show you how AI can help you, or let me show you how you can use this in your job, at work, in your business to just achieve your goals or whatever it is that you're trying to do. And so I think the AI literacy work is super important. And then helping people go from idea to actualizing something in the real world. I think that that's just something that's so important to me, because I was already doing that. But I feel like this has been the year 2024 where I've done that at an unprecedented place in my life, where I'm able to put out so much, build so many things because of AI. So me doing it is impactful, but then also me showing people how that they can do it is impactful. I was just watching the founder of Blavity, Morgan Devon, on her podcast, and she was saying that when she started, she wanted to be the voice of Black millennials. And so for me, when she said that, in my mind, I just said to myself, like, well, I want to be the voice of Black millennial innovation. I want to be known as like one of the best, greatest innovators, ideators of our time. And so I feel like AI is going to help me do that.
And I think the important thing for sure is that ideation component. But what I also want to really emphasize is you go beyond ideation, because what you shared is, you had these ideas and these thought processes and these innovations that could be, but what I think is most impactful is actually the execution of it.
Yeah.
And going beyond, I thought about this thing yesterday, but it's not just that. It's I thought about this thing, and here's how I'm actually beginning to launch and create implementation. And beyond that, what I think is really insightful about you is the idea of, you're not really just innovating and in executing for yourself. You're also getting to a point, and have been in your work, of actually teaching people to fish, which
Yeah.
is extremely important, because again, you could build and create and produce all these wonderful things and stay like in your zone over here, but you're coming out of that and saying, hey, this is what I did, here's how you can do something similar or your own thing, and here are kind of the tools and the skill set that you can apply to be able to launch that thing, right, to make that happen. And I mean, I've gotten some information from you for sure, even related to Black AI media, and I think that that's imperative for people to take away and realize that whenever they're talking to people, especially somebody in your position in space, that it's it's definitely a strong consideration for, how can I practically apply this, and how can I basically set myself up and prepare to be whatever that phrase is for them. You mentioned, the voice of Black millennials, and you want to be the voice of millennial innovation. So for other people, how do they get to that point? Which I think is really empowering. You mentioned your offer bot that you're currently preparing to launch, but I'm also curious, what else is like, what's next for you, for your work,
Yeah.
um, for both your, for your business alignment, partnerships. Can you share any other exciting developments or future plans with us?
Yeah, so I'm also a writer and a speaker. So another contribution to the world is I and we've talked about this, like I think on our first call meeting, is helping those two that are multi hyphenate, right? And multi passionate not settle for one thing or listen to that saying that I think I was under and that I was being suppressed by, that's like um jack of all trades, master of none. Like I always heard that growing up, and you don't have to listen to that. You don't have to follow that, because you can be multi hyphenate and also be productive and also be profitable. Like, you don't have to be in one lane or one thing. And so when people think of my legacy years from now, I am going to be doing more than one thing and have made money in more than one thing and have been impactful in more than one thing. And so coming out with that brand and launching that brand, which will be next year, to empower people to go in that direction, but also give people structure and strategy for operating in that direction. Because it's not for the weak, but it can be done. And so I want to also impact in that area as well. So that's something that's coming too. Being like a multi hyphenate creative or technologist as well. And then I wrote a book, and that's coming out. And this is going to be one of my stories for how you can ideate and go from idea to execution, and you don't need to stay in your head, because ideas in your head, they're just like dreams, right? Like you don't, no one knows that. It's only happening in your head. So how do you get it out of your head? So anyway, I wrote this book earlier this year. I had posted a couple times about interviewing, and I have been coaching on interviewing a lot in just previous years and mentoring whenever I was at work or whenever I was in my job. I was always asked to like coach on these type of things like interviewing, getting a promotion, positioning yourself for your next role. I was always like tasked with this kind of stuff when I was at work, or someone would ask me to join X, Y, and Z ERG group, employee resource group, or mentor people in this space. And so I had put a post out there that went crazy about like interviewing like an Olympian, and this is what you need to do. And so those tips went crazy. So I took that as a signal of, again, I need to put this information out. And that happened in, I think, like April, May. So a lot of stuff happened. My dad got sick, threw me off, all this stuff. So I really was trying to write the book. I challenged myself. I really was trying to write the book in 3 months and put it out there, but a lot of things happened. It didn't happen. But book is almost done. It's about interviewing, and interviewing well. It's a playbook for interviewing, for young professionals, recent graduates, or career pivoters. And so that's coming out. It's almost done. I am on the last phases of like design, editing, final edit. I'm self publishing. So it will be coming out very soon. In the next couple of months, you'll see me posting about it and being on tour for it next year. So that is another thing that's coming out, but also will be like dual purpose because it's coming out and I want the information to come out, but I also want that to be a part of people helping people get their ideas out there and helping people innovate for themselves.
Well, first, congratulations on the book. That's
Thank you. Thank you.
it's definitely something that we need to celebrate first and foremost. And I also like, I think that that's a great topic to produce a book on. And the way that you did it, again, going back to extending beyond the ideation and going into execution, seeing, you shared information on a free platform, went viral, realized, wait a minute, this this is me again now where I can step in and leverage myself, but also at the same time continue to share information and teach other people in the world of interviewing, which is I've definitely come across, certain aspects of that particular process for different people in different industries. And yeah, it's definitely a thing that I think just about everybody would usually have questions about, depending on, what industry you're in, what role you're looking at. But if you can actually provide valuable, actionable insights in something like that, that can span across industry, which I
Yeah.
assume is what's going on, then I mean, I think that that's a win for anybody to pick up. So I'll be looking forward to supporting that and sharing whenever we see it. And we're also building out a library within Black AI Media as well. So maybe we can get that book added there so people can have another access point for it.
And I also, of course, leveraged AI to write the book, right? What that was going to be how I was doing my experiment of how I was going to write it in 3 months and put it out in 3 months. But it didn't happen. But I still want to leverage that challenge to myself to help people write books. I think it's super important that people in our community put their IP into something tangible that lives forever. Like books live forever. That is how we have had things from like, you know, whatever, way back in Egyptian times and even before, is that people wrote stuff down. And so we I feel like it's so important to leverage your IP and put your IP out in that kind of way, whether it's like your blog or whether you want to write a book. I just think people need to be putting their IP out of their head and into something like actual, real, tangible, touchable.
Definitely. If you have ideas, producing something that you can have and use in different spaces, and whether it's for networking purposes, propelling yourself in your career, building your own thing. I think, yeah, I would 100% agree, and have seen that be very valuable for a lot of people. And I hope that when you launch your book, people actually take from it the valuable information and insights, apply those things, and at the same time realize that there is more to be had, and you also can write a book, right? Like, that's the
You
thing.
also can write a book, and I will at some point do a workshop on like how to write your first book with AI, because I think that is a question that I want to answer for most people listening, or just the culture in general. I get this question a lot. It's like, how do you ideate with AI? And for me, it's natural. I study knowledge bias a lot, which is when things are natural to you,
Mm.
it's usually genius to other people, or you don't see your own genius because it comes naturally to you. I love that concept. I'm always talking about it. But people have been asking me how, not just how do you create a graphic with AI, or not like how do you feed AI something and then you get something, but how do you actually start an idea with AI? How do you ideate from scratch, from nothing with AI? So that's a workshop that I eventually, maybe Q1, Q2 depending, put out there, is how do you start your idea with AI? How do you get ideas from AI? How do you use AI as a brainstorming ideation partner? Because that's something I do every day. It's a huge cheat code. And I want to help people have that.
Definitely do that. Using AI as a thought partner is, yes, extremely valuable. Oh, yeah, do it, because there's a lot of people. I personally know people who could use that,
Yeah.
and they're trying to figure out, well, what's next, and how do I put these things together. But the assumption is that you have to go into whatever platform and already have these ready-made prompts, or know exactly what you want to say. And I think people get a little apprehensive at the fact that you don't actually have to know how to put this into a complete sentence. You can actually just go in and start messing
Yeah.
around and come up with a bunch of amazing things. But the key is to get to the point of starting, which, in you doing that session, whatever that looks like, if it's a series or anything like that, that would definitely be a win for a lot of people, because, as you mentioned, using AI in that capacity is definitely a cheat code. But one fun question I wanted to ask you, actually, was related to resources and opportunity. So, if you had unlimited resources, how would you expand your current reach in the work that you're doing?
Oh man. So if I was just talking to somebody about this yesterday. If I had unlimited resources, I would definitely be following the Gary V model, which is somebody would be following me around 24/7. That person would be editing, like I wouldn't even touch that content. It would basically be like my show, like Real World or True Life. If you're from back in the day, MTV, you know what I'm talking about. But somebody would be following me around and like showing my thought processes, and showing like what I do when I'm by myself to the world. That would be my, it might happen soon, sooner than I think. But if that would be my unlimited resource, and like being able to put that content out there in a way that um goes according to my brand, because I could technically be doing that myself, but it wouldn't look the way I wanted it to look. So if I could have unlimited resources, somebody would be doing that, like making my own show, but more look like very cinematic, very storytelling ish, very docu series ish, and putting that out on YouTube. That would be my unlimited resource, because I feel like that would be the way to get my everything that I'm doing out from like 0 to 100 like real quick. So
Yeah, I can see that. Somebody, yeah. And when you mentioned Gary Vee, I was like, oh yeah, I can picture that. Like I understand what you're saying, what that looks like in practice. So yeah, well, I mean, at the rate you're going, I mean that might happen next week. So we'll see. But I did have one major question that's actually somewhat related to the driving question around narrative, but it's more so thinking into the future. What legacy do you hope that your current work will have, and what do you hope that that will all leave behind for those that come after you?
yeah. So while you're asking me this question, I see Knit in the background. I told you before how dope I think those pictures are. I love them. So my legacy, I'm reminded of him, and his legacy is like I want my thought processes, my frameworks, my the way unique way that I do things, my zone of genius to be out there, usable to the world for generations. Like that is my ideal, that is my top goal. That's like what I'm trying to get to. Because like I was saying before, your IP is what lives on forever. So if nobody ever leverages that or nobody ever uses that, then it's like useless. So that's my legacy, is like having my IP, my ideas, my books, whatever it is that I like, lectures. I'm eventually trying to get to the point where I'm a guest lecturer at universities. Whoever is at Harvard, UCLA, Stanford, if you listen to this, then hit me up. But that's my goal, is to be able to teach my strategies, frameworks, processes to the world, and having it be out there and live forever, is my goal. And why I brought up Nip is because that's exactly what's happening with his legacy. I mean, he's not here anymore. It got cut short, unfortunately, tragically. But the way that he did things is even serving for me, and I know for you, as plays and frameworks and strategies that we can leverage and that we are leveraging if you're in a digital space, and if you are like a hip hop fan or a Black culture fan, you probably have heard of what he did and you are probably leveraging it. So that is the legacy that I want to have and leave.
And yeah, definitely important to pay homage whenever we can, whenever you have the opportunity to, and not just leave it at that, but also take what we are able to learn and glean from others, and build on that. So I appreciate what you mentioned about the legacy that you want to leave behind, because again, it's going to be something that young people, anybody coming into the world, within the next 10, 15, 20, 100 years can pick up and run with, and it just expand it even further beyond, even my wildest dreams of imagination right now.
I wanted to just mention just like a practical or real life example, because that to some people probably can sound like way out there, or I don't know, like something that's just you went above their head. But I will say, like, how I even started to think like that, or how I even saw that as a reality for myself, is from working in corporate. I remember I met somebody who worked at a job, but I had left there. So we both worked at this one job, not at the same time. And then later on, we worked at the same job at the same time. So at the same company, we met up again. We met up. I never knew them in the previous job. And they said, I know you from so and so company. This is us introducing ourselves to each other. I already know you because I know you from said company that we worked at together, and they're still using the stuff that you did over there, and your name is on it. So like when I saw your name when I came into this other company, I already knew who you were, and I was like, "Oh, I'm excited to work with this person." So when I started to notice that that's what was happening, I'm like, "Well, I'm an influencer. Like I know what the things that I'm doing is like already leaving an impact long after I'm gone." And so I was like, "Oh, like that's actual business. Like that is something that you can leverage and use. It's called a thought leader. So I was like, well, I'm a thought leader. That's it.
Yeah, and I like the tangible aspect of that, and just talking about how, again, and a lot of people, if you've worked professionally in just about any capacity, even if you're new to the workforce, you have likely done something that is still in place, or potentially has legs. And definitely if you've had any type of like leadership roles, or collaborations on teams, and you've been at the forefront, or really the driving force of any initiative or program, like you have that kind of quality. But I think what's really amazing about what you just shared is that you realized it and said, hold on, wait a minute, I can take that for myself. And I think that that's what we're seeing now come to fruition in the work that you're doing. But again, it's still benefiting other people. It's just not being leveraged by the corporate machine for their
Yeah,
benefit. It's something that you're able to use for yourself, which again is ultimately what we always get to, and talk about, like, Nip and anybody kind of in that same frame of thinking. That's really what they've shown us, and I think that
for
that right
sure.
there in itself is at the core is ultimately what many of us really want to get to. But I think you created a nice visual and scenario of something that's actually occurred in your life to showcase that. So I'm sure that maybe that's what happened to other people, or will happen to them, or they bear witness to similar things. But it's important to recognize and realize those things in real time when they happen, because your next move can really be a determining factor of where you propel forwards. Is there anything else that you want to share with the audience about your current work, and also take some time to let the listeners know where they can, where they can find you, how they can tap into the work that you're doing, follow you, even become a client of any of the work that you're producing out in the world?
Yeah, for sure. So if you want to become a client, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. That's probably going to be the best place. You could DM me. You can even just DM me the phrase become a client, and then I'll know where you heard this, and I'll know, like, okay, we heard this from Black AI Media. You could become one of my personal branding clients, where I will help you establish your personal brand, curate your personal brand, and then give you the messaging and the framework of how you can then put that out there on socials. I coach on LinkedIn exclusively, so I can't really help you on IG, TikTok, whatever, but I'm sure you could use the same content strategy, use Chat GPT, whatever AI, and figure out how to turn that over into the other platforms. We'll help you get your personal brand out there on LinkedIn, and then figure out how you can then turn that idea or that messaging into some sort of profit and offer. And then you could also use Bloomy Brand GPT. Go to the GPT store, look that up. You can start using that on your own. I have a set of prompts, personal brand prompts, which is my AI personal brand toolkit that you could use to get started. If you don't want to work with me yet, if you're not ready to become a client, you could go ahead and leverage that. Use that to start building your personal brand out. And then you can sign up to become an early reader of the book. You get on our list, you'll get a free chapter preview of the book sent to you via email, and then you'll be the first one to know when the book drops. So if you want to be able to interview like an Olympian, get that gold, get that bag, then read that book. So that's it. That's how you can work with me. I'm Jeneba Wint across all platforms. I mainly play on LinkedIn. That is my hometown digital space. So I'm there all the time. DM me, hit me up on there.
Well, Jennifer, thank you again for taking the time to join us, and to share, your narrative and the work that you're doing. And we look forward to seeing where you're going to take things in the future, and how many people you're going to take with you. Which I think I'm really walking away from this conversation with, is that there's a movement happening, and thought leaders like yourselves are the ones who are at the helm, and you're not forgetting about other people and leaving people behind, which I thoroughly appreciate. But again, this has been another episode and interview with The Road to 100 at Black AI Media. I am Cedric Scott Jr., and we look forward to having you all on the next one. Peace.